Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about fleeing Cuban castaways rescued. Dr. Paul Kengor joins me. He's the author of The Devil and Karl Marx and many other books. Mark Cuban Rebuked and Impeachment Theater and some hard facts. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth. America Can We Talk is sponsored by GC Works, a Dallas-based company performing advanced technology research in the oil and gas industry.
Hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. We talked over the last several weeks, we talked about the idea of the growing power of the leftist government we have in Washington and how historically people seek freedom. They actually don't like to live under repression. And we've been talking in particular about how when we had, for example, the wall was up in Germany, nobody was struggling to get over from the free West Germany into the communist East Germany. The only flight that happened was always the effort of communists to flee to freedom. Same thing in Cuba. So quick story, there were three individuals, two men and one woman, who were rescued recently, a couple days ago, by a U.S. Coast Guard helicopter flying south of Florida. A U.S. Coast Guard helicopter saw three people on a deserted island jumping up and down and trying to flag them down. Long story short, the helicopter first dropped food and water and eventually went in to rescue them. These were three Cuban nationals. And their story was they had been on this island for 5 weeks. Their boat had sunk, and they actually swam to shore from where the boat sank, and they were on this desert island. And the only reason I really raised the story in the first, actually, I sent Matt, the wonderful producer, I sent him a map. If you could put that map up, this is where they were. You see that, and I may pronounce it incorrectly, Anguilla Bay. You see where Cuba is. They're north of Cuba. They're obviously heading to Florida, and they had their boat sink, and so they had to be rescued. And they're now in the custody of America's forces, America's ICE. The U.S. Coast Guard eventually rescued them. Now they're in ICE custody. And I just want to posit that story as kind of a wrap up of what we talked about yesterday. Everybody flees from communism to freedom. There was a line in one of the stories about this incident where these two men and one woman had been rescued after 5 weeks on this island. I'm going to spare you the detail of what they've been eating. But one line, one of the stories was, and the mission, it was unclear why the Cubans were stranded or where they were headed. I wanted to raise my hand. I know the answer. I can tell you the answer. These are not people from Florida trying to get back to Cuba. That's not what's happening. It's Cuba to Florida. It's communism to freedom. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five. I mentioned at the start of the show, we have a guest joining us, and he's written many books. I'm going to show you the one we're going to talk about today. It's called The Devil and Karl Marx by Dr. Paul Kengor. This is the picture of it, and I did get this from Amazon. Okay, don't tell anybody. I still use Amazon, even though I try not to. But anyway, it's a great, great book, and we're going to be talking with Dr. Kengor. And before he joins us, I want to briefly tell you about his background. He is a professor of political science at Grove City College in Pennsylvania. It's a private Christian liberal arts college. But I want to tell you the names of the books he has written before this. And it's funny because what I printed out had the names as well as the pictures of the books. And in our home, we have many conservative books lining our bookshelves. And I was noticing, hey, we have that. But this one, Devil and Karl Marx, his current one, the subtitle, Communist Long March of Death, Deception, and Infiltration. And this was actually published in August of 2020. He also has The Crusader, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of Communism. We have that one in our house. A Pope and a President, John Paul II, Ronald Reagan. He has Dupes, How America's Adversaries Have Manipulated Progressives for a Century. Principles of a Reagan Conservative. I mean, he's just a prolific writer and a very, just a great guest to have. I'm very honored he could join us today. So without further ado, let's say hello to Dr. Paul Kengor.
Hi, Debbie. Good to meet you. You caught me on my way to Cuba. I was planning to go down there and live and get all that great free health care and free education for my kids.
I've been
So you
thinking
caught
about
me
that
just in
too.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You know, if I could, here's a stat for you. And this was published in the Black Book of Communism, which was the Harvard University Press book, came out at the end of the 20th century, so 1999. And at that point, we were aware of about 100,000 people who had attempted to make the swim from swim or float from Cuba to Florida between 1959 and 1999. And the estimates are that possibly as high as upwards of 40,000 people drowned, died trying to make that swim. And the Castro government would fly overhead with helicopters and drop sandbags on them while they were in the water. Now, they didn't shoot at them with guns because that would have caused an international incident. Dropping sandbags on them almost seems comical, right? But you know, you get hit with a sandbag dropped from 5,000 feet after you've been swimming for 30 miles. See how that works, right? But that's yeah, and how many people swam from Florida to Cuba during that time? Zero.
Nada.
Zero.
Yes.
Michael Moore, all the rest of them, all that wonderful health care, Bernie Sanders, nada, right? Nada.
Right.
Anyway,
I love
I
that.
digress.
I'm so glad you did. Actually, I love that you jumped in, and it's such a great point. We've been talking about that in the show a lot in the last few weeks, and actually for years, the idea that the people do not want to live under communism. I'll tell you a funny story too. We're getting sidetracked, but in college, I remember having a professor who was a pretty far leftist and talking about the beauties of communism. And I asked the question, well, you know, if communism is so great, like at the time, you know, you have communist Russia, if it's so great, why do they have to wall them in? Why do they have to make it that you get shot if you try to leave? What is the reason that you would have to do that? And he had this really intellectual, I still remember the language. Yes, the territorial imperative is perplexing. I'm like, that's your answer?
Yeah,
I mean,
nice.
There's no answer to it. Nobody wants that.
If I could respond to that. So I interviewed Cap Weinberger, Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense, and it was shortly before he died. And he said, look, I'm an old man. You're a young man. At that point, I was probably in my late 30s. And he said, you're going to be around longer than me. He said, I want you, anytime anybody ever brings up the Berlin Wall, I want you to ask this question. In which direction did the East German guards patrolling the Berlin Wall, which direction did they face their guns? And the answer was east, on their own people. They never even had to look west, right? Because no one's going to come from the west. Nobody, right? So they faced their guns on their own people. Usually, and Weinberger said, you're talking to a Secretary of Defense, former Secretary of Defense. You know, typically you build fortifications and walls to keep people from invading, to keep the enemy out, right? In this case, they built walls to keep their own people from fleeing. And that right there is a statement of communism. And that professor of yours, you know, they hate it, leftists hate it when we say this, but if he likes it so much there, he ought to go live there, right? And he won't. And that's all you need to know.
All you need to know. This is already a great interview. We're not even talking about your book yet. Thank you so much. I want to tell you, I heard you were interviewed by someone and you made a comment. I was laughing out loud at my desk at home. You made a comment about a book you tried to write that related to Hillary, because you had Ronald Reagan, and the name of the book was Ronald Reagan, something about Ronald Reagan.
God and Ronald Reagan?
Yeah. And you talked about
God and Ronald Reagan.
Okay, but the God and Hillary Clinton, and
Right.
the line somebody had about, was it like the liberals don't care if she believes in God, and the conservatives don't believe she does, or something like that.
Yeah, it was, and the publicist and I joked it did terribly. And by the way, the book was translated into Vietnamese, of all things. Right?
Okay.
The only book I've had. It's got a little Vietnamese red flag on the binding, on the spine. And yeah, we said the book tanked because it was rejected by liberals who didn't care that she believed in God, and conservatives who didn't believe that she believed in God. That's exactly right.
It was just a great line. Okay, so I do want to talk briefly the purpose of this book, The Devil and Karl Marx. I must tell you, I did not know until this book that Karl Marx had such a bizarre fascination with the devil and just evil. And it's funny because I mentioned to one of our adult kids who said, "Oh yeah, I knew about that. I never knew that." And so I want to start with just having you give our listeners a description of Karl Marx's fixation on the devil in his poetry he wrote in his life. Just give a summary of that, if you would.
Yeah, it's really chilling. In fact, it's hard to summarize, as you saw, right? I mean, there's so many poems, so many writings. I opened the book with a poem from 1837. If I can remember one stanza, he said, "Thus heaven I've forfeited, I know it full well, my soul once true to God is chosen for hell." And I think the second poem that I quote, 1841, he says, "See this sword, this blood-dark sword, which stabs unerringly within thy soul. The hellish vapors rise and fill the brain till I go mad, my heart is utterly changed. See this sword, the prince of darkness sold it to me." He beats the time, he plays the time ever more boldly. I play the dance of death. Really chilling stuff. And in some cases, look, with it, like with any writer, any poet, and Marx fancied himself a poet. Marx wanted to be a poet. You don't know to what extent he's being autobiographical, but I think in some cases it does seem autobiographical, especially that first verse, right, or that first poem. His soul was once true to God. He rejected God. He turned his back on God, and he wanted to write nothing less than the Goethe's Faust of his age. And Faust is the book with the Faustian bargain, with the Mephistopheles character, the demon, the devil character. Yep. And this is chilling, Debbie. People ask Marx, "Do you have a favorite line? Do you have a favorite statement? Do you have a favorite quote?" Now, maybe if somebody asked that question of me, I might cite a Bible verse. I might cite a quote from a saint. I might say something like, "Be not afraid." Ronald Reagan had an Old Testament verse and a New Testament verse. Reagan had a plaque on his desk. It said, "There's no limit to how much a man can achieve if he doesn't mind who gets the credit." Right? Nice statements like that. Karl Marx said, "Oh, yes, yes." Line from Goethe's Faust, the Mephistopheles character. "Everything that exists deserves to perish." Right? Everything that exists deserves to perish. And that was Marx. That was Marxism. This idea that Marx and Marxism is this lofty, idealistic vision. Marx was all about burning down the house. I mean, he called for the ruthless criticism of everything that exists. Says communism seeks to, this is one of my favorite quotes, right? Communism seeks to, this is right out of the manifesto, Communist Manifesto, seeks to abolish the present state of things, right? Abolish the present state of things. Calls for the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. The forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Overthrow by force. I did an interview with Dennis Prager, and he said, really, what this is, it's pure nihilism.
Yes.
It is. Marx was not. It wasn't about building up. Karl Marx wanted to burn down the house, which is why he went after the most basic fundamentals: property, God, morality, right? The basic the church, religion, abolition of private property. There's even a line in the manifesto, abolition of the family, exclamation mark. Even the most radical flare up at this infamous proposal of the communists. Exact words. So Marx really was a revolutionary seeking an absolute, to borrow from the language of Barack Obama, a fundamental transformation of human nature and of all of society, up and down. This wasn't just economic tinkering. This was truly revolutionary.
One of the many things I want to get to talking about today, that was just brilliant. Thank you for everything you just said, was the idea that it's just astonishing when you think of all the philosophers and the great thinkers throughout the millennia who posited ideas about the rights of man and the identity of man, and that this gentleman, I shouldn't even call him a gentleman, this man, Karl Marx, managed to have, hatred for God, or became an atheist, but just hatred for religion, destruction of everything, and yet he's held up in so many circles as a laudable, someone to be honored, studied, and it just, I think it's an amazing commentary on American just our world intellectualism, on world academia, that he isn't just vilified as a dark and evil, I don't know what to call him, dark and evil force in history, but he's still read and actually praised in the world today. I find that shocking.
Well,
I'll let you react to that, then I have a question.
Yeah, if Marx was on the right, a conservative, right? And yeah, gentleman, he was no gentleman, was he? I mean, the way he treated women, the way he treated himself. If Marx was a conservative, he would have been canceled a long time ago. I mean, the guy was a racist. He was anti-Semitic. He was an ethnic Jew. I mean, he came from a Jewish family, a family of rabbis. He completely turned his back on the Jewish faith, the Jewish people. He said, quote, the Israelite faith is repulsive to me. Some of the statements, I mean, you could take statements from Marx and put them up on a board and say, hey, take a guess at who said this, right? What is the worldly cult of the Jew? Money, right? What does the Jew worship? Money, right? You could be like, oh, who said this? Hitler? Right? No, it was Karl Marx. Marx's evolutionary views, he used the N-word, viewed black people as lower on the evolutionary scale than white people. He and Engels joked about Marx's son-in-law, Paul Lafargue, who was partly Cuban, like 1/8 Cuban, Marx and Engels deduced, which meant to them that he had some Negro blood in his veins, and so Marx referred to him as Negrillo, or the gorilla. And this poor guy had such low self-esteem that he committed suicide in a suicide pact with Marx's daughter. And in fact, Marx is the only historical figure that I know of who had two daughters who committed suicide in suicide pacts with their husbands. So if Karl Marx was a conservative, if anyone from a Ronald Reagan to even Donald Trump had a record of statements like this, the left would be going crazy. They'd be canceling him, and professors with busts of Marx in their offices would be run down by campus feminists and other liberals, but he gets away with it because it's Marx and he's coming from the left, the far left.
Because he's coming from the left. I want to talk about his attitude as well as eventually today in America and around the world, the attitude of the communist, you use the word infiltration, I think, in your subtitle, but the idea of the infiltration of the churches in America and the particular churches they targeted. And what was the reason? Because on one hand, they're trying to say, I mean, for Marx, he's an atheist, and you'd think he would just say, they're silly people. I reject them. But the thinking of Marxism and communism gets you around to wanting to infiltrate it. And again, it's for the purpose of destroying it. Destroying its purpose. Right. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Marx said that communism begins where atheism begins. And by the way, listen up, you religious left people who say, "Oh, the communists can really teach us some stuff about the Christian gospel." Yeah, Nikolai Bukharin, one of the founding Bolsheviks, editor of Pravda, said communism and religion are incompatible. We must fight religion at the tip of the spear, at the tip of the bayonet. Lenin said there is nothing more abominable than religion. All worship of a divinity is a necrophilia. They banned religious services. They blew up churches. They threw priests and nuns and bishops in jail. They put them on trial. They were brutal to religion. But then in the United States by the 1930s, and this was launched by really probably the second main head of Communist Party USA, a guy named Earl Browder. The main head of Communist Party USA, the first one, William Z. Foster, who was also one of the founding board members of the ACLU. Okay,
there's no connection there. Go ahead.
No connection there. In fact, the two heads of the ACLU early on, the two founders, Roger Baldwin and Harry Ward. Roger Baldwin wrote a 1929 book called "Liberty Under the Soviets," right? Not liberty under the U.S. Constitution, liberty under the Soviets, right? And he means this in a positive way. He's the founder of the ACLU. Harry Ward, who was known as the Red Dean of American Protestantism, he was a Methodist minister. He was one of the founders of the ACLU too. So by the early 1930s, American communists realized, this stuff about calling religion the opiate of the masses and calling religious people superstitious idiots and so forth, this is getting us in trouble. And there's no way that we're going to be able to pull this off in America. Over in the motherland, right, in the USSR, they could just take the priests out and club them over the head, put a bullet in their head and burn the church down. But we can't do that in America, right? We have something called the Constitution, even though we might prefer liberty under the Soviets. So instead, they did what Browder called the outstretched hand. They started singing, sweet praises about Christianity and talked about, how communism and Christianity are compatible, how the two could work together. And this was part of infiltrating the churches within. And they had their biggest success with the mainline denominations, the Episcopal Church, the United Methodist Church, and they had a lot of success too with what became Presbyterian Church USA. But especially with the Methodist Church and the Reverend Harry Ward, who ran a group called the Methodist Federation for Social Action, which was basically a social justice movement in that day.
It's amazing. I was going to mention those three churches because they are today among the most liberal churches that I think many people who follow those faiths, Episcopal, Methodist, and Presbyterian, they don't know that the theology they're hearing has its roots in communism and the effort of communism to manipulate their faith. They think it's the doctrine or theology according to their faith, not recognizing the roots of, and in fact, the tearing away of the church of the roots of the gospel, where your Christian faith is supposed to be rooted, the actual scriptures. But they think and so they have become convinced that somehow what we're watching in America, the leftism, what I call Marxism. I want to ask you my last question. I know I'm almost out of time, but the Marxism of today, they think they don't hear it as inconsistent with what they learn at church because it's kind of similar. Go ahead.
That's right. And a lot of the Marxism today is being applied not in the economic realm, not on issues of taxes and so forth, but on matters of culture, on matters of race. I mean, this is Patrisse Cullors. She's the founder of Black Lives Matter, and this is her memoirs. And the foreword is written by Angela Davis, the most famous American female communist of all time. And she says in there, she says of herself and Alicia Garza, the co-founder of Black Lives Matter, we are trained Marxists. We are trained Marxist organizers. And she goes through here and she talks about we spend a year reading Mao, we spent a year reading Lenin. And it's remarkable. I mean, if this book was just about the racial stuff and the mistreatment of her father and brother, which is all very tragic and I'm very sympathetic to, and you can't argue with any of that. She's got my heart on that. But it gets very political, very ideological, and then after that gets very sexual and very focused on gender and transgender, transphobia, all these other things. So a lot of the Marxists today, if you go to the website today of People's World, which is the successor publication to the Daily Worker, you can go to the About section, and it says that they're looking for what they call cultural workers. Cultural workers. Oh. So not factory workers, right? Not farm workers, not steel workers, cultural workers.
I'm going to check that out. Okay, I know we're almost out of time, and I want to let you go. As promised, I think your book is fabulous. I'll show our listeners right here. Again, The Devil and Karl Marx by Dr. Paul Kengor, right here. A great book. You can get it on Amazon, and I'm sure other places too, in bookstores. And I appreciate your taking the time, Dr. Kengor, to write about this person. It had to be almost troubling to dive into you probably studied it anyway, but troubling to dive into the depth of his thinking. It had to be deeply disconcerting to think this person is swaying so many millions even today.
Yeah, that's the worst thing about it. That's what keeps me up at night, and also to research this stuff and write about it. It's dark, and I teach a course at Grove City College called Marxism. I'm teaching it right now, and one of the exercises that we do, in addition to reading Communist Manifesto and other books line for line, is we go to the websites, Marxist.org, CPUSA.org, that's Communist Party USA, the Socialist Workers Party, the Trotskyist Party. That was the party that Bernie Sanders was a formal presidential elector to in 1980. We look at the website of the Democratic Socialists of America, Revolutionary Communist Party USA. Read the stuff. Actually go and see what they actually say. And to go back and do research on Marx and Lenin and so forth, this is very dark, and it's not easy. It's not fun. I'd rather write about baseball or football. You know?
There you go.
I mean, this is not enjoyable. Right.
Yeah. Dr. Kenger, I can't thank you enough. Great book, really eye-opening, especially in this era in America where there's just such a resurgence of a legitimization of Marxist ideas, socialist, communist ideas as somehow belonging in the American political realm and having a place here. So it's just very enlightening. And thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you, Debbie. Take care.
Great talking to you. Okay, I'll tell you, folks, why I think this is so important, why I want to share that with you is there is a lure, a mysticism on the American left about Marx and socialism and communism. These people, you know, these are just better people than we are. They're not these evil, ugly capitalists who care about money. He could not have been a more twisted person, Marx personally, a racist, a sexist, an anti-Semite, grotesque in his thought about life and God and religion, and his intentional perpetual depravity and willing to have him as well as his followers infiltrate the Christian church, infiltrate society in this world for the purpose, as you heard Dr. Kenger describe, to destroy it. To destroy it. It was not about building up anything, pure destructive motive. Great read, got to do it. Okay, I'm going to hit another story very quickly today. Talk about our friend Mark Cuban. So we live here in Dallas, Texas, and Mark Cuban, you know, he's famous. And so he put out a statement a couple days ago that he was going to not play the national anthem at the beginning of the Dallas. This is our basketball team in Dallas, the Dallas Mavericks. He was not going to. He's the owner. Wasn't going to play the national anthem. And he put out some statement. I was going to read it to you. It's really obnoxious about how, you know, it really was the preference to not play the national anthem prior to the Mavericks games was to show that there was a, you know, respect for everyone's viewpoints and a recognition we have to keep things, you know, somehow we have to represent everyone's interests, you know, inclusion kind of stuff, but just really, really obnoxious. So next several steps that occurred, the NBA weighed in, you know, so he's just one NBA team here in Dallas, the Mavericks. The NBA weighed in and said, you know what, actually you are going to. It's required. You're going to play the national anthem prior to the NBA games. Well, part of what occurred since then is there's a Dallas talk show host named Mark Davis, who's on one of the stations around here, and he emailed back and forth with Mark Cuban to say, hey, you know, what's the story here? You know, why wouldn't you be playing the national anthem? And Mark Cuban had all sorts of defenses like, well, you know, the fact is they haven't been playing it all year, all season, because there's no one at the games because of COVID. So it's really not the same thing. And even when we had fans there, a lot of them don't stand for the national anthem. A lot of them, even the people who work, are still there at the stadium for the games because they have to, you know, work the games. They didn't miss it. No one seemed to even miss the national anthem. A lot of, you know, kind of mealy-mouthed defenses of his having made a very public decision to make a public statement saying we don't honor the flag or we don't honor the national anthem. We're not playing it. So NBA told him, yeah, actually you are going to. And then the other thing I want to tell you that's the evolution of this was, so somebody asked at one of the press conferences for President Biden, they have his press secretary, Jen Psaki, who fielded a question. She was asked by a reporter, what does Mr. Biden think, President Biden think, about whether or not, about this Dallas Mavericks, Mark Cuban decision not to play the national anthem. So I sent a clip of this to the very wonderful producer, Matt, who's going to quickly play it for us right now.
National Basketball Association games.
Well, I haven't spoken with the president about the decision by Mark Cuban on the Dallas Mavericks, I should say the national anthem, but I know he's incredibly proud to be an American and has great respect for the anthem and all that it represents, especially for our men and women serving in uniform around the world. He'd also say that, of course, that part of pride in our country means recognizing moments where we as a country haven't lived up to our highest ideals, which is often and at times what people are speaking to when they take action at sporting events. And it means respecting the right of people granted to them in the Constitution to peacefully protest. That's why he ran for president in the first place, and that's what he's focused on doing every day.
Okay, I would like to tell you what a mealy-mouthed answer that is. In America today, in 2021, no one thinks that the national anthem, playing the national anthem, no one thinks that that is a statement that America is perfect. No one thinks that if you play the national anthem, you are oblivious to the challenges we have with respect to conduct by some police officers in some occasions, by the past history in America of having perhaps an unjust or unequal justice system. The playing of the national anthem is about unifying the American people around the idea of America. It is not an affirmation America is perfect. It's not an affirmation that there's absolutely nothing more to be worked on. But when you go out of your way, as Mark Cuban did, because no one even asked him. It wasn't like, he was being hassled by the press. Hey, how come you're not playing the national anthem? He had to point out that he hasn't been playing it all season. He had to, because no one even knew. He went out of his way because to him, Mark Cuban, he's joining the cool crowd. He's joining the woke Americans who know that they're past being patriotic. They're too enlightened to respect the flag. They're too enlightened to love America. They're too enlightened to want to hear the national anthem. This is in this era, and this time in America, this is a political statement of, look how cool I am. I've joined the woke crowd. I don't play the national anthem. Aren't I cool? So he did, as I was saying, get told by the NBA, yes, you are going to. And he did graciously say, okay. But I think it's a troublesome thing. And I want to make the commentary on it. It's a troublesome thing because a man like Mark Cuban, who is, I think he's a second generation American, maybe third generation American, has ancestors who came here. He has become tremendously wealthy enough to buy the Mavericks. America has been very good to him. He's become wealthy and successful, and because of what America is. Because America is a wonderful country that provides opportunity. Not a perfect country. Doesn't mean we don't have things to work on. Of course we do, and we will continue to work on them. But this is, in my view, when you're Mark Cuban and you have anything you could be talking to the media about, they hang on his word to spout off and say, by the way, I'm not playing that national anthem anymore. He's really saying, don't you guys think I'm cool because I've joined the cool crowd, the woke crowd, and I won't even respect the national anthem. So I'm glad he got kind of shut down. He got rebuked by the NBA. And I think he got some fan mail that wasn't all that friendly. But I'll close this little segment by saying this. As I talk about on my show all the time, we are in the middle of a battle over the idea of preserving America. We have the Democrat Party overtaken by the Marxists. The Marxists run the Democrat Party now. Clearly, Marxist agenda inconsistent with the agenda of America. And it is time, what is needed in this country is more people to say, I'm going to stand up for America the great, America the good. Not America the perfect, not America which never has anything gone wrong or has nothing to apologize for, nothing like that. But America is a good and noble country, and that's the core issue, the core political battle in this country. Do you understand America's goodness? The ideas of its founding, the ideas just embraced in the Declaration and the Constitution, and the rights of man to live in freedom. Do you understand that, and will you fight for it? Because what the Marxist left is saying to America, what they run on, what they do, what they say, is all about denigrating the idea of America. It's exactly the opposite of supporting the good and great idea of America. I wanted to hit a brief thing today just to talk about the impeachment. I've read some articles that are, people are just saying basically, everyone should be watching these impeachment hearings from start to finish, the current Senate impeachment of President Trump. And I have not watched them, and I have not commented on this whole week's. I think there are other things to be talking about. But I want to talk about, tell you why I'm saying that and why I think it's so important. Number one, the impeachment itself is dubious, given that the president is not in office anymore. They're not removing anything. It's not the legitimate purpose of an impeachment to hold this impeachment trial because there's nobody to remove. He's already gone. And they all know this. They also know that the president will not be removed. They're not going to get 17 Republicans to join all the Democrats and vote to remove the president, even though he's already gone. They're not going to have the vote. So the impeachment effort will fail. They know this. They know it isn't constitutional because there's no one to be removing. They're not removing someone who's in office. They know they can't win. But why they're doing this impeachment hearing is to stir up the passions of the American people against President Trump, against the Trump agenda, against the 75 plus million Americans who voted for Trump, and ultimately to send the message to the American people that conservatism, the GOP, Republicans, the entire right wing of America is a deplorable, horrible group that are to be hated. It is pure political theater in the Senate. And by that, to be really clear, what happened on January 6th was terrible and wrong. It was atrocious. It was violent. We have criminal prosecutions already happening. We'll continue to have criminal prosecutions already happening, continue to happen. We're prosecuting people who smashed windows, who broke things, who were physically violent, who were confrontational, who were physically threatening. There are laws in place to do that, and we are prosecuting those people, and we should be. My heart goes out to everyone who lost their lives that day. And by the way, one person who lost his life that day was a Capitol Police officer, and his death has not yet resulted in a criminal prosecution of whoever was involved in the altercation with him and the physical abuse of him while he was in the Capitol. Officer Brian Sicknick, Capitol Police officer, lost his life, and there's apparently a great deal of confusion. There was a story originally that he was beaten with a fire hydrant. Now CNN is reporting that is not true. CNN saying, no, that didn't really happen. And in fact, CNN is reporting that the medical examiner said that this guy was not hit with it. There's no evidence of blunt force trauma. So whatever happened to him, he lost his life that day, and I'm very sorry. And I agree with those who say obviously you have to track it down, keep investigating, figure it out. Whoever one or more persons was involved in assaulting this officer, Brian Sicknick, needs to be prosecuted, and I'm going to guess they will be. The other people who lost their lives that day, one was an American military veteran who was shot in the neck by a Capitol Police officer, and in that case, they've decided they still haven't identified the police officer, so no one knows which officer fired, and no charges were going to be lodged against him. I think that sounds dubious, but at least they investigated, and I believe they've announced the investigation is still ongoing. But the initial announcement was, won't release the officer's name and won't charge the officer for shooting and killing a U.S. military veteran. The other three people who passed on I'm really just getting to the point, it was a very bad thing that happened on January 6th. But because it was very bad, we have criminal prosecutions, investigations, prosecutions. It doesn't mean we have to entertain what the left is trying to do in the Senate hearing, which is to use as political theater to stir up more hate and more division in America. There is no reason to humor that. I will tell you, by the way, this interesting thing, just a kind of like how different life would be if a few things had been different. There were some most interesting numbers that came out, and I want to share them with you. We're in a situation right now where the Democrat Party has the White House, the Senate, and the House. The Washington Post ran these numbers, and I'm going to say them slowly in case you want to write them down, or they're actually on our website, americacanwetalk.org, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under shows, drop down list of links, a link to this Washington Post article. I want to know how close the election was. Even assuming, let's assume no fraud at all. Every vote that counted was legal, which is dubious, but assume every vote that was counted was legal. There was no stuffed mail-in ballots. There was no vote flipping. There was nothing bad that happened. Even the way they did count the votes. Listen to how close it was. Republicans came within 90,000 votes. Within 90,000 votes of controlling all of Washington. This is Washington Post numbers. Came within 90,000 votes. 43,000 votes for president. Out of the 75 million for Trump, 75 million plus, and whatever number you want to attribute to Biden, the numbers range, but whatever number you want to attribute to Biden, out of all those millions, Republicans came within 43,000 votes of winning the presidency, 32,000 votes of winning the House, and 14,000 votes of winning the Senate. So, a 90,000 vote shift, and we'd be talking about President Trump's second term and the Republican majority in the Senate and the House. I think that's really important to keep in mind, because right now, what the left is trying to sell America is that America rejected the Trump agenda, that America rejected the continuation of the Trump presidency for a second term, that America poured into the voting booths to vote out Trump and to bring in this Marxist Democrat Party, the Democrat Marxists of America Party, which now runs Washington. And the message of the left is the reason that the Democrats won everything is because America wholeheartedly, roundly rejected the Trump agenda and the Republican Party. And that's not even close to true. It is razor-thin numbers, even if no fraud at all occurred. 90,000 votes, and everything would be different. We'd be talking about America affirming the Trump agenda, America sending a Republican majority to the House and restoring the House, America keeping the Senate in the hands of the Republicans. The entire discussion would be different. And the other reason this really matters is the left is acting, the Democrat Marxist Party of America is acting as though they have a mandate. They're acting as though their agenda, their mission, their intention to grotesquely expand government power, to re-enter treaties that will end up committing America to losing American jobs because of the climate treaty that we're going to re-enter, that America wanted them to get back into the Iranian deal, which essentially enables the Iranians developing nuclear weapons. The left is arguing they have a mandate because they swept the elections. And the fact is, even if no fraud occurred, it's this close. The Democrats have no mandate. It is perfectly within the rights of the serious conservative patriots of America, the Republicans in America, the patriots who love freedom, to stand up and resist the Trump agenda in legal ways, nonviolent ways. I'm not talking about violence, but I'm talking about resist at every legal way possible, every legal means possible, to stop this leftist agenda, because it's a very, very scary agenda for America's future. Last quick thing, I sent something to Matt the Wonderful. I'll have you put it up in 1 second, but I want to tell you first this story. So as we look around, we're going to have, by the way, another expert coming on the show. I think maybe not next week, the following week, but talking kind of where we are in COVID and numbers and treatments at work and the vaccines and all of that. But America has a wide division in terms of a wide range in terms of policy of how we in America are dealing with COVID. And the state of Florida is famously and popularly pretty wide open. The state of Florida has a very good, strong, conservative Republican governor who is not shutting down everything in sight. He is not part of the Shut Down America agenda. He is not part of the mask every place you go agenda. He has been about opening up Florida to the extent possible, and serious conservatives are flocking to Florida. Conferences are moving to Florida because they can't be held in the states they're normally held in. Florida is gaining not just business and the growth of business, but they're gaining a reputation of, this is where you go if you're trying to leave a state where your freedom is very limited. This is where you go. So the Biden team, we're just planting the seed of this story. We'll follow up more sometime as it develops. But President Obama, actually, funny name, President Biden, and this one website I read often refers to President Joe Biden as Joe Obama, puts together, Joe Biden and President Obama, because the Biden administration is just a continuation of the Obama administration. But anyway, President Biden's administration has announced that they are weighing U.S. travel restrictions to Florida. They want to put in place at the federal government travel restrictions on American people to be able to go to Florida because Florida is relatively open as to COVID. You don't have to mask yourself while you're home by yourself. You don't have to mask yourself in the way you do in other states. And businesses are open, resorts are open, restaurants are open. People are living life in Florida, enraging the Marxists in Washington who are all about tyranny and control. So I want to plant that seed and tell you we're going to follow this story. But there was a great tweet out, and I'm going to start doing a quote of the week. There's a great tweet out, and this is by a Republican member of the U.S. Congress from Arizona, Andy Biggs. I got to meet him at some conference. He's a really good guy. But anyway, Andy Biggs had a tweet out, and I'm going to call it the quote of the week, and here it is. It's becoming clearer that the Biden administration intends to use COVID-19 as their can't-miss opportunity to federalize uncooperative red states and the private sector. Unity, in quotes, will be realized when every American lives under the umbrella of government control and tyranny. And the reason, among many, that I love that quote is because the unity term, the unity word and theme is a big thing in the Biden administration. They're trying to say, yeah, we're trying to bring unity. Their claim is, that Trump was divisive, but he, Biden, is bringing unity. And I'm going to close out the show by making this point once again. When leftists say unity, what they mean is they'll force everyone in America to comply with what the leftists want to do. They never mean listening to both sides. They never mean weighing the pros and cons, finding common ground, finding something we can all agree upon. When leftists like Biden say unity, they mean they're going to force America to follow what they, the left, wants to happen. And then when everyone's forced into compliance, they will put a big check mark or a star and say, look, we've accomplished unity because we shut them all down. Everyone's doing exactly what we're telling them. This, my friends, is not unity. This is the tyranny of the Democrat Marxist Party just getting started in Washington. At the close of every show, I like to tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we will start that today with fleeing Cuban castaways rescued. Cuban refugees washed ashore. They actually swam ashore on an uninhabited island. Castaway, like the great Tom Hanks movie, in real life, 2 men, 1 woman, 33 days before they were found and rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard. Okay, here it is. They were survived eating conches and rats. Sorry to share that with you, but hey, they didn't die. Mainstream media unable to determine motive for the fleeing Cubans. Couldn't figure out. One of the headlines was, who knows? Motive unknown. Like, I can tell you the motive. West Germans never fled to East Germany. South Koreans never flee to North Korea. And Floridians never flee to Cuba. Leftist narratives deny the reality of the human heart's desire to live in freedom. Will enough Americans wake up and stop the leftist takeover of America? And on Cuban Rebuked, Cuban announced dropping of the national anthem before Mavericks games. The NBA, watching declining ratings and declining popularity, affirms the opposite league-wide policy. Cuban bows to official NBA policy, reinstates playing of the anthem. The national anthem, again, my friends, the national anthem is not a partisan political statement, and it does not imply that America is or ever was perfect. Playing it at public gatherings is an expression of unity, loyalty, and affection for America. America must reject pervasive, elitist, ruling class attitudes that say pop culture trends and not history should control how all Americans should think. Modernity, the post-truth, post-Christian world, means pro-American traditions are mostly silly and outgrown. And this is what the left is telling you. Pro-America traditions are silly and outgrown. Another example of the ruling class out of touch with mainstream Americans. And on impeachment theater and hard facts, the second impeachment is political theater, not a serious legal proceeding. The attack on the Capitol was wrong, dangerous, and criminal charges must be filed against wrongdoers. And they are being filed. But the impeachment is about a ruling class frenzy to so demonize, ostracize, and condemn Trump so as to make sure no outsider ever again dares to go around them or to defy them. But the Constitution still applies. You can't remove somebody from an office he doesn't occupy. And the Constitution, Chief Justice constitutionally required to preside. He hates Trump, and he still refused. From the Washington Post, Republicans came within 90,000 votes of controlling all of Washington, 43,000 votes for president, 32,000 for the House, and 14,000 votes for the Senate. This is why, those close numbers, this is why a full, honest, transparent federal investigation of election fraud would be good for the country. What is there to fear from an investigation? In closing out the show today, I want to mention our website is americacanwetalk.org. I send out an email every week, once a week only. I never do more than that, once a week. If you go to our website, americacanwetalk.org, you hit the subscribe button and put your email in, and we get notified, and it'll be on the email list. It gives you links back to the show over the previous week, links to interviews, tells you upcoming bits of news, where we're headed with the show. So, and if you like this show, you can subscribe, and it's a great way to share the show so other people can learn what the show is about also. I'd love if you would do that. Number 2, we have started a great thing with Raindrop Technology. Matt the Wonderful, I didn't give him notice, but you can subscribe to our via text message to this show. And the way you do that is you text to, yeah, there you go. Thank you so much, Matt, for finding that. Okay, to stay in touch with me, our show, America Can We Talk, on your text message, go to your to line, and on the text message, put in 53445 and put in the message part, America. That's all you have to do. And what I will do with that, so you know, we have a website where we have people texting in. And so we have the ability to communicate with you via text message. I've been collecting these for several weeks. I haven't sent one text message out, except for the automatic greeting that goes out and says, hi, thanks for texting, thanks for joining. I will not inundate your text message. I will not inundate you with text messages. I know what it's like to get too many text messages. I will not do that. I will save the text messages for things like opening on a new platform, so I want you to know how to find the show, a very special guest joining us, changes to the show, ways to stay in touch. So I encourage you to do that. And the reason it matters so much is because there's so much social media, big tech censorship that I don't want it to happen one day that you go to Facebook or YouTube and look for America Can We Talk and can't find it. Or you go to Twitter and look for @Debbie Can We Talk. My Twitter handle is @Debbie Can We Talk, and not find it. I don't want to have social media cause you and I to lose touch. I want to be able to stay in touch. So I do not, right now we're on those social media platforms, and but we are moving our show, and so you can listen to other ways. The main message I want you to take away in terms of listening to the show, you can go to my website, americacanwetalk.org, and you can watch the show live right on the website. So you don't have to go to any other social media platform. americacanwetalk.org/live, and when the show starts, you click on that, and up comes the show right on my website. You can do that. I urge you to start doing that. And then we're also posting our shows after the show's over on Rumble. At Rumble is the other place. We've started to move the show to Rumble. And at Rumble, again, it's America Can We Talk, all one word, with appropriate capitalization. We're on Rumble too. I'm telling you all of this because I have to tell you that the show is growing. The emails I get from you are so heartening, and they're frankly heart-melting. Emails I get from you, the listenership is growing. The concern about America is growing. I am not going to stop speaking up for this extraordinary, precious idea of America. I am going to continue talking to you in every way I can, getting the message of America out to more and more people, help people understand what's happening in our country, the danger to the future of freedom in America, what's happening on the American left, what the Marxist takeover means, what free people can do to stand up for the idea of America. I'm going to keep on talking, and I don't want to lose touch with you, my precious listeners. I'm Debbie Georgatos. This is America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I'll talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you